Okay, so let's make a quick revision of what we have so far with the French Alps website before applying the CSS today. We have this simple looking website that's not very nice yet, but we'll start improving it today by adding styles. If we look at the syntax, we have a div container. So here's the div container, which is the parent container. It opens at the top and closes here right before the body element closes. And it contains a header, which has the H1 and the H2. There's a navigation after the header. There's a div whose ID is content under the navigation. And that div contains currently 2 images and 2 sections. When that div closes right here, there's a footer at the very bottom. Okay, so this is what we have so far, and right now we're going to start styling in CSS. So let me first of all link this HTML file to the CSS file. We haven't created yet the CSS file, but we will in a moment. In the head element, so within the head element, we have the title, the meta, and we're going to open another element called link. Okay, link is also self-closing, so we don't need to do this. And using the link element, we're going to use the href attribute in order to link this index.html file to a file called style.css. Again, which we haven't created yet, but we will very shortly. And then rel, which stands for relationship, style sheet, type, text / CSS. Okay, so let's save this. And what I'm going to do now is create my CSS file. So file new. And before doing anything, let me save it. So if you see here, it says untitled text. Let me go ahead and save it by holding down the command key and hitting S. And obviously I have to be in the same location. So my work is inside of a French Alps folder that resides somewhere on my desktop within my other folders and so forth. I'm going to create this file called style.css within my French Alps folder. Hit save, and let me just increase the font size so that we all see better. And I'm going to start with placing a comment. So this is how we write comments in CSS. So ****. If you notice, it's in gray, it comes in gray, and whatever you write within these two asterisks will not be seen on the screen. So I'm going to say CSS for the French Alps website. Okay, so what this note is doing, it's basically only a note for me. Nobody's going to read or see this note on the website. It's only a note for me so that when I open my file in the future to change something, I understand what this is. Okay? Now, let's start with the body element. So obviously our website has a white background, that's the default, and if we wish to change the color, we can go ahead and do so. So body, I'm using the body element because I want my entire background to be a certain color. The body element is this entire page. Okay, this whole, from the top left corner to the bottom right corner, all this white is the body element. The body element is the parent of all other elements. It's basically what we see on the screen. So instead of white, I want the body to be gray, background, and I'm going to write this in shorthand. Okay, if you remember in the PowerPoint of the CSS, the shorthand for background is the following. So pound 7E is a gray color, URL, open close parentheses, semicolon, and something within the URL. So images, I'll explain now what we're doing, button.png. Okay, so when you downloaded what you needed for today, you must have found an image called button.png, which is a very small image made up of two little gray cubes. And I went ahead and placed it in my images folder, and I can show you that right here. So French Alps images, I had my ski 1 and ski 2, and I placed my button.png there. Okay, that's because all images go inside of the images folder. So I'm calling that image, and the path to that image is through the images folder. And I'm using the shorthand property. So what I'm saying is I would like the background color of the body element to be this gray, and I want to create a pattern with this small image called button.png on the whole page. Okay, let's save this and view. I'm going to refresh now. This is it. So I have my gray, and then I have that little tiny image that's being repeated. It's being repeated because that's the default, unless I say here no repeat, which I don't want to because I want this pattern to happen in the background. All right, then font. So whatever the default is in your browser, that's the font that's going to show here unless you change it right now. So maybe you have Times or Verdana, but what I'm going to use is Arial. So 12 pixels, Arial, comma, Helvetica, comma, sans serif, semicolon. Let's save this, refresh, and you'll see that everything became 12 pixels. Now, I had Arial for my default, so my font family did not change, but the font size is changed. Okay, let's continue. The div container. Remember that we have a div container right here, and it contains everything inside of the body element. Okay, so div pound container. Why am I doing this? Div pound container, open close curly braces, and we'll insert properties here. But why did I say div pound container? Let's go back to index, because the ID of the div is container. That's the value that I chose. And the ID, remember, is represented by a pound sign, as opposed to class, which is represented by a dot sign in CSS. So I'm representing the ID with a pound sign. I'm saying I want to reference the div whose ID is container, and I want it to have a width of 1000 pixels. So think of it as a box that is 1000 pixels wide. I also want it centered on the page. If you remember in the CSS lesson, to center block elements, we use the margin 0 auto property. And I want it to have a background color, of white. And the hexadecimal for white is 6 Fs. Remember that every line of syntax on CSS should end with a semicolon. Sometimes you type something and it doesn't work. One thing to look at is if you indeed type the semicolon or not. Okay, so what we expect to see now is a white box, which is the div container, that should be centered on the page and that should have a background color of white. So I'm going to save this, refresh this page, and there you go. So slowly, style-wise, design-wise, our website is becoming better. Now you see the space here. What is the space? What is creating this space? It's basically the elements, some of the block elements that have a default margin. And I know that that element is the body element, but there must be another one because this space is too big. So let's see what that is. So body, I'm going to add here a margin 0. So remember that some of the block elements come with a default margin, and if we don't want to see that space, we just set the margin to 0. So I told the body element that I would like its margin, its default margin, to become 0. Save and refresh. Let's see if we will see less space here or no space at all. Okay, nothing happened. I refreshed the page and I don't see a change. So then it must be another element this time. Which element is it? What are these elements? This is the div, the white one is the div, and I know that the div does not have a default margin. This is the H1, this is the H2. So it's probably those two. Okay, let's go ahead and fix them. H1 margin 0. Let's see what happens. Refresh. Okay, that's it. That's it. The space is gone. And so basically it's the body and the H1 causing that space. And we set both to 0, so we got rid of that space. Now we still have some space here between the H2 and the H1, and that's the default margin of the H2. Okay? I can see here some additional space. Let's set the H2's margin also to 0. So H2 margin 0. We could have placed H2 next to H1 by just adding a comma here, but since I'm going to give H2 more properties, I'm just separating the whole element. So margin 0, and I'm going to refresh. Okay, that space is gone, that default margin, it's actually a margin top, so we got rid of it. And what I'm going to do now is just change the color of the text here. So H1 and H2 are currently black. Let's change, I'm going anyway, so it's really up to you. Let's change that to a gray. So color, pound 555555. When we say color, we want to color text. When we say background color, we want to color a container, a div, like the background of whatever container we have. Okay, so refresh. So I have who's joining me to the French Alps in black, and I'm going anyway in gray. Let's continue. So now this is the header, right? The header contains the H1 and the H2. And what we want to do is also make it gray, and we want to give some padding within. That's because we don't want these two phrases to touch the top left corners of the header. Let's first give a background color to the header and we'll understand better what we're talking about. So enter header, open, close, curly braces, and let's set the background color to a dark gray, 333333. Save and refresh. Okay, so this is the header background color that I created. Obviously I didn't say color, I said background color because I want you know, the header container, if you will, to become gray and not the words inside the header. So I use the background color property. Now, again, as I said, we don't want these two phrases to touch the top and the left. That's why we want to have some padding inside the header. So padding. When we say padding, without saying padding top, padding left, and so forth, it means padding is added on all four sides. So padding 20 pixels. Let's refresh. Okay, so it's getting nice. We have a nice gray header that has 20 pixels padding on the top, left, bottom, and right. Obviously, we don't see the padding on the right side, but it's there. Let's continue. The H1, if you see this black, on gray, it's too dark. We hardly read it. So let's change the color of this text to white. So I'm looking at H1 and I will just say color and white. There you go. So 6 Fs make the white.